Hello, everyone. This is third part of our series of videos about programmable economy and blockchain and crypto. So we talked about why the world is decentralizing, why decentralization is important, why trust is such an important issue, and why it should be solved, and what scale does it actually take, and to what extent can it help the global economy. In this section, we will try to define what is Web3 through giving it some characteristics. So we talk about what is Web3 in terms of how it is different from other types of software or networks or business models, because it is actually all three of these things together. So let's start. The first important characteristic of Web3 is ownership. You probably seen this tweet by Chris Dixon or any other form of it by other people where he compares Web 1, so the beginning of internet, where people were able to start their own servers and service websites and web pages from it so that other people can read it. So basically you were able to be your own publisher, and that was the origin of the internet. In 2000s, maybe mid 2000s, through Delicious, Reddit, then later on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, the web became participatory, meaning that users were not only able to consume information, they were able to create information. And most of the platforms today, it's actually the definition of platform, is they're not actually creating the content. They're just a service that provide connection between people. So me as a content creator, I can publish a video on YouTube or write a tweet or Facebook message and post, and then other people can consume it. So that is Web 2, and it was actually powered by multiple technologies. So Web 2, for example, is characterized by cloud computing. It is characterized by tagging or social graph. Those are unrelated technologies, but all of them combined create new business models and new ways how people interact with information. Basically, like a new step up the information theory, information relationship. And Web3 is taking and leveraging everything that exists. It's taking like the broadband, the physical network, the cables that are buried underground. It is taking the capability of creating your own services and running your own node that was invented during Web 1 era. It has taken the capability of exchanging information and creating content online from Web 2, and it is adding this layer of ownership and financialization of assets and activity on top of it. It is also doing it in the decentralized manner, meaning that unlike Web 2 platforms such as Facebook and Twitter, where everything that people create actually belongs to the platform and they're free to delete, show, hide from the feed any information they want. In Web3, most protocols are decentralized. If I'm doing anything with Bitcoin network, there's no other entity that is responsible or that can single-handedly censor or delete or somehow limit my access to that network. Another important and probably the most important property of Web3, I'll just find a good place for my face, is composability. Web3 is composable, meaning that you can think of Web3 as a set of Lego building blocks. But unlike physical Legos, Web3 is software. Software can be infinitely copied and scaled. So this is a set of infinite Lego blocks that you can combine in very different forms and permutations. So how this is achieved? First of all, most of Web3 technology stack and products are open source. And open source is amazing. Open source, really, in a nutshell, it means that every and each problem has to be solved exactly once. And that is the philosophy of Unix, where they decided that instead of building complex proprietary systems, let's build smaller components that are the best at their own functions. So I can write a component that maybe shows text on the screen. It is very simple operation, but I'm doing it the best. And every other application is reusing my component because most applications actually need to show text on the screen in some form or another. The difference is, historically, open source existed for quite a long time, maybe a few dozens of years, 30, 40 years. But it Web3 really became a business model for open source. It was never before possible to monetize the work that you are doing in open source. And now you can have incentive layer or incentive mechanisms that allow you to capitalize on your work. And that creates more experiments and drives more open source development. And every open source development, every open source project becomes one of those Lego blocks that then can be combined with everything else. And that means that you actually exponentially scale the number of permutations. And the more experiments you're doing, the more trial and error you're doing, the faster is the innovation. And that is exactly the reason why Web3 as an industry is moving so fast forward. I also want to show examples. So what I have here on the right, this is just a very practical and good illustration of this property of composability. So in 2009, Bitcoin network was created. Vitalik Buterin was writing articles and was editor of one of the online media outlets that was focusing on Bitcoin. So he was learning about Bitcoin, he was writing articles. If Bitcoin didn't exist, if he wasn't able to look into the code, into the source code of Bitcoin, he would never really came up with the idea of Ethereum. So you can imagine that one of the bottom layer of this pyramid would be Bitcoin network, because that's what led to creation of Ethereum, although indirectly. There's no direct relationship between these two. But then Vitalik and the team, they came up with this idea of Turing complete decentralized, basically compute engine. Ethereum is a network where you can run any arbitrary programs, and those are executed in decentralized manner. So unlike Amazon or Google, there's no central service and there's no central party that is responsible for running your software. It is run in distributed network by multiple nodes at the same time. So that is Ethereum. It was created. Then on top of Ethereum, a group of people which call themselves MakerDAO, they created a stable coin called DAI. DAI is a digital token, is a cryptocurrency that is backed to $1. So it always costs $1 per DAI, and they have very complicated mechanism and math behind how this is done in decentralized manner. So there's no centralized party. But the most important part is not how DAI works, although it's an interesting topic and maybe we can talk about it in the next video. But the important part is DAI wouldn't exist if there's no Ethereum. If MakerDAO team came up with this idea of creating a digital stable token, and then they started building layer one network, like the whole blockchain from scratch, I don't think they will be done by now, even though DAI exists for 7 years. Or maybe 5 or 6 years right now. So DAI was only possible because there was open source Ethereum network and there was Solidity programming language that enabled MakerDAO team to create DAI, and they leveraged all these technologies and they added a small layer on top of that. So DAI is a protocol just like Ethereum, but with different goal. Then we can go one layer up. Uniswap is decentralized exchange. It is using very just amazing innovation, which is called automated market maker. In a nutshell, it is the idea that you can have an exchange without an order book, where me as someone who wants to swap tokens or make a trade, I don't trade with another person, but the market maker is an exchange itself. The smart contract is my counterpart in every exchange operation that I do. So that's a smart mechanism, and Uniswap is greatly successful product. Actually, to be fair, all of these products listed here are super successful. All of them have more than $1 billion total value locked, and many billions of dollars of monthly trade or turnover transaction volume. But Uniswap, as an exchange, when you want to trade assets, you want them to be priced in something stable like USD. So Uniswap really wouldn't be possible if there was no DAI. And DAI wouldn't be possible if there's no Ethereum. Because Uniswap is leveraging all of this technology. Uniswap is also a set of smart contracts on top of Ethereum virtual machine and the top of Ethereum network that is leveraging and directly using from their smart contracts, from their pools, DAI protocol. Because DAI is one of the currencies that people use to price assets on Uniswap. Then we can take another example, which would be Avi. Avi is basically a crypto bank. You can deposit and you can take loans. International. There's a lot of features in Avi, and they have a lot of sub products, but the core functionality is a bank. You have deposits and you have loans, and it works perfectly. They have tens of billions of dollars of volume. They are one of the most popular products in crypto, but again, as in the previous example, Avi wouldn't be possible if there was no Uniswap, because Uniswap is just an integral part of it. I don't want to go into too much technical details, but then Uniswap wouldn't be possible if there's no DAI, and DAIs wouldn't be possible if there's no Ethereum. And then Yorn Finance is another example of something that people built on top of Avi, and other successful products, and other many billions of dollars in transaction volume. And Yorn Finance is basically algorithmic money management software where people do not lose custody over their funds. So I can give my money to Yorn Finance to manage, but and they will do very complicated money management. For example, they would deposit this money into Avi that then will be used into Uniswap pools, and then the fees from trading on Uniswap will be collected and converted to DAI and then deposited back to my account. And in this whole process, I'm not losing custody over my funds. So Yorn is another protocol. And we have this beautiful picture here, this beautiful idea where there's a bunch of protocols. All of them are open source. You can read every line of code of any of these products. There's no really IP involved in it. But those are multi-billion-dollar products. The founders of those projects are wildly successful. Customers are happy. They're generating a ton of value. And this is an example of like very mature industry that's growing very fast. And that is something that was only possible because of Web3 technologies, because of permissionless blockchain and trustless systems. This is an example where you can build open source protocol that does one thing, but very well. Then you put this thing onto a stack of other protocols. You become best in your category. Somebody else will be building on top of you, which would actually compound and will create network effects for your protocol. So the more protocols are using your open source stack, and your the more applications there is on top of your protocol, the better it is for you. And tokens is this amazing idea that actually enabled this value capture. Tokens is the first form that allowed us to directly monetize open source. Yes, there's examples like Red Hat and IBM who do consulting and services and dev shops and so on, or even Amazon. Basically, Amazon Web Services is their business model is just monetizing open source, because at the end they're selling Linux or some open source databases. But it is not directly. Like, creator of Linux is not making money on it, or creators of MongoDB or Postgres are not making money on it. In Web3, this is possible, and this is combining these two very important pieces together. First is financial incentives. We live in a capitalistic society, so there must be some incentive to innovate and to build cool stuff. And second, open source, which is this amazing way to experiment and invent new cool technologies. Another characteristic of Web3 is the fact that it is liquid and permissionless. So what do I mean by being liquid? What happens in Web3 right now is that there is a financialization of liquid asset. Financialization is basically securitization, basically translating stuff into financial instrument. And stocks is one of the examples. When stocks were invented, that gave a huge push into development of different industries, because you could now buy share in a company and you can invest in it, and there's a secondary market, and that is all an amazing innovation. But with Web3, with crypto, we can now uh, financialize different types of assets. For example, time or talent or equity in form of tokens or skills, or even just being part of the community. Or I can create a token that, for example, Filecoin token that allows you to store data on decentralized storage network, or Ethereum token that allows you to make computations on Ethereum network, or maybe um, I don't know. Well, there's thousands of different tokens, and all of them have some utility. They're representing some utility that is not just share in the company. In most cases, most utility token actually allow you to do something, get some services, get design work, get computation, get access to closed community, get access to music NFTs, and so on. So Web3 has invented a new business model. Business models are not coming very often, and we will talk about it in the next slide. But this is just an example of Web3 financializing and making all of the stuff in the world liquid and tradable. And sometimes it's not tradable. For example, reputation, something I was talking about in the last video. Web3 is making reputation quantifiable and liquid, and something that you can use programmatically, but it doesn't have to be liquid in this case, because if you allow trading of reputation, it breaks the whole system. But what it leads to, once you have liquid assets, and once you have this property of permission, being permissionless, and not needing to ask anyone permission to trade or use any system, any protocol, which exists in Web3 by default, you can get to this amazing idea of DeFi matrix. DeFi matrix basically is solution for the problem of money. And the problem of money, the reason money exists is because exchanging stuff, barter, is not convenient. If I'm selling haircuts and you're selling oranges, it's quite hard for us to trade without using some form of money, like, for example, gold or dollars. And that was true, and that is the reason why money was actually created by human civilization. However, this is becoming not as an like this. All these trades have transaction costs in it. If I'm using USD to trade oranges with haircuts, there is a transaction cost. I need to have those dollars. I need to give it to you. There has to be some remittance system. There has to be some cost, some system that verifies that the bill I give you is actually legit and it's not fake. And you need to be able to maybe you need to use acquiring software if I'm paying with cards. So payments are never free. Even if it's small payments, even if I'm using the coin costs something to mint. Actually, smaller coins are more expensive to mint than their face value. But regardless, DeFi matrix is the idea that once you have different types of assets tokenized, you can have direct exchange between those two tokens. Automated market makers like Uniswap allows you to create a pool between any pair of assets. So, for example, if I have a token that represents Filecoin token that represents right to store 1 terabyte of data for 10 years in Filecoin network, and you have a token that represents you have Bitcoin, or maybe you have a token that represents 10 hours of your work, we can trade directly. Anyone can trade anything in the world, including their time, including physical space, real estate, securities, equities, skills, access, options, any type of derivatives. anything can be directly exchanged with anything else without using of money in between. So if I have a token that represents a haircut, and you have a token that represents one crate of oranges, we can make a direct trade. We don't need to use USD, Ether, Bitcoin, or any other asset in between. And that means that for any trade in the economy that is happening, we are taking those transaction costs away, and we're making the whole economy much more robust and much more efficient. The last part I want to talk about is that web3 is a business model, and that is also a very crucial idea to understand. So let's talk about the history of business models. There's quite a few business models in the world, but not too many, about 40 to 50, depending on how you count. Most businesses, if you look 50 or 100 or even more years ago, they were examples of so-called pipeline business model. The pipeline business model is leveraging production economies of scale. For example, you have a factory, you buy your raw materials, for example, aluminum, and then you produce aluminum forks. And because you're adding value, there's value add happening because you have labor and capital and then some kind of machining that's going on. You can sell those 10 grams of aluminum in the form of fork at higher cost than you can buy raw aluminum. So that's the example. And then the profit margin that you have for each fork, that is your way to capture value that is generated by this type of business. About 15 to 20 years ago, a new business model became very popular and very prominent, and now it's taking large part of the global economy, which is platforms. Platforms, unlike pipeline businesses, are not producing anything internally. Platform companies, so you probably have heard about it, Airbnb doesn't own any real estate, Uber doesn't own any cars, and Facebook, the largest media, doesn't have any journalists or writers or content creators on payroll. So platforms is this type of business that allows matching and information discovery and deal just contract execution between seller and buyer. But seller and buyer are providing service outside of the platform. Uber driver is using their own car to work with Uber. So the platforms are leveraging consumption economies of scale. Unlike pipeline businesses, their competitive advantage is not on the production side because they're not producing anything internally, but on the demand side. So they are able, Uber has millions of riders, Airbnb is able to market their platform to millions of tourists, and Facebook has billions of users of Google or Twitter or YouTube or Instacart or any type of platform you can think of. The platform is capturing its value through something called take rate. Take rate is basically a fee, a percentage that the platforms keeps to themselves. For example, from every Uber ride, about 25%, depending on country, goes to Uber, and then 75%, this is what driver actually receives. On, let's say, YouTube platform, from 50 to 70% is taken by the YouTube itself. So content creators are getting at best 50%. And then on Facebook or Twitter, for example, content creators are actually getting zero, meaning that the take rate of the platform is actually 100%. And I would argue that the next step would be development of the protocol business model, and that already happened. But my argument is that this will become one of the most prominent business models in the future. And the reason protocols are outcompeting platforms by default is that they have much more aligned, from incentive standpoint, value capture mechanism. So protocol is an open system, is a set of rules that allows market coordination. So the reason for protocol business model to exist is because using protocol allows you much easier coordination, much cheaper and much more efficient coordination, depending on what you want to do. Maybe you want to use money and you use Bitcoin or DAI. Maybe you want to make trades and use Uniswap, or maybe you want to get a ride or stay at some property or use social network. The value capture mechanism in platforms is much more efficient compared to protocols compared to platforms because it is lacking this take rate. It doesn't have to have the take rate. So imagine the same situation as Uber. The protocol does not need to actually extract profits from every ride. It really, if the cost of the ride and the fee that is taken by the protocol, if it is allows the protocol to break even, that is enough. Moreover, protocol cannot go higher because there's an arbitrage opportunity. If I create a protocol that would take 20% take rate from every ride, somebody else would fork my protocol because it's open source and just reduce that number to 15%. And then somebody else would do it again and reduce it to 10%, and therefore it will arbitrage itself out. And the take rate would be the minimum possible fee that is enough to sustain the protocol. Just look at the example of Bitcoin or Ethereum protocols. Those protocols are not extracting any revenue, partly because there's no one to actually get revenue, because there's no one who controls it. So there's no Uber or Airbnb or Meta corporation that is actually looking to extract revenue from running that protocol. It is decentralized. But then every node, it is incentivized to mine or to execute computation in Ethereum network because they're being rewarded with tokens. So token engineering is what's replacing the take rate. Token engineering is the replacement for the business model. And in the protocol, the take rate would always be much, much, much lower than the platforms. And that's the reason why they would outcompete the platforms, at least one of the reasons. And but that doesn't mean that protocols creators, founders, developers are not are doing it for free. It's not just altruistic to build protocols. You can actually make money on the protocols, and you can make much more successful products, even financially, that are protocols, because you are not earning revenue from every transaction, but rather you're issuing tokens. Those tokens act as a medium of exchange or some form where the value is accrued. So the more successful the protocol is, the more value is accrued to the token price. And that means the token is growing and the price of the token is growing with the growth of the protocol. The more successful is the protocol, the higher is the token rate and then the token price, and then you can sell it to the market, and that is how you realize your gains and how you make money on the protocol. Another reason why protocols will win over platforms. So first is it is cheaper. So sellers are getting paid more and buyers are paying less. That's quite obvious. And that is very sound, very foundational reason for protocols to win. Another reason is they are open, meaning that in protocols, anyone can create application that leverages functionality of this protocol. Imagine decentralized Uber protocol. So now we have decentralized reputation system, we have Uber driver profile, we have verifiable credentials saying that, proving that this driver is he's a good driver, the car is in good condition, there's no violations, driving license is okay. So all this information is stored on the protocol layer. But then the application itself, it is not owned and managed by any single company. And moreover, anyone can go and create an application for this protocol. So unlike Uber as a company, as a centralized service, decentralized Uber protocol will have thousands of applications. There will be Uber for party buses. There will be Uber for children, cars with children seats. There will be apps for every specific location. There will be apps that have their own loyalty or marketing systems. So again, experimentation, there will be much more experimentation. The innovation rate will be much higher, and there will be many, many, many front ends, many applications that all interact with the same protocol layer. And if you want to see an example how it works today, just take a look at Bitcoin. If you have Bitcoin, the fact that you own it is recorded on the Bitcoin blockchain. But then if you go to App Store or just Google, you can download thousands of Bitcoin wallets. All of them have different business models and different UX and different security and market differently and available in different languages and geographies. But you can install all of them or any of them, and you will be able to access the same Bitcoin that you have on the blockchain. It is not important what application are you using because your data is not stored with the application. The developer of that wallet never has access. They don't even know how many Bitcoins you have, and they don't need to know. Their goal is to provide a good user experience. But the protocol goal is to provide actual transactions, be it monetary transaction or matching drivers and passengers or any other type of business that platforms are currently doing. That is it for Web3. Thank you.